Okay, in this video we're going to be talking about solving absolute value equations. And if you didn't know absolute value equations, what it is, for absolute value, essentially if you think of the analogy of a shower head, so if you jump in the shower and you are dirty, you come out clean. If you jump in the shower clean, you still come out clean. So what an absolute value symbol does, it basically makes everything inside of it positive, no matter if it's negative or positive initially. So absolute value makes everything inside of it positive. That being said, there are two scenarios when you're dealing with absolute value, the negative version and the positive version. So you're always going to have two possible scenarios. So these are the steps. So first, you need to get the absolute value symbol alone on one side of the equation. You need to make sure you use inverse operations, so same as solving for x. Once the absolute value is alone, and only when it's alone, you would split into two possible scenarios, the positive and the negative. Make sure you do not distribute into the absolute value symbol. It is not a parentheses, it's a whole other thing. Don't try to distribute it because some of you guys will. Step 3, solve each equation. You're going to have two answers, one of them being the positive, one of them being the negative potentially. So you're always going to have two scenarios. And yeah, let's just jump right into it and do a few examples. Okay, so example number 1. Let me cover this other one for now. So example number 1, we want to figure out what is the answer for the equation absolute value of x is equal to 7. So question number 1, is the absolute value symbol already alone on one side of the equation? Well, yes it is, right? There's nothing on the other side besides the absolute value. So you're basically ready to roll. You can actually split this up into two equations. The first one being the absolute value of x is equal to the positive version. So one of them is going to be the positive, and the other one is going to be the negative. So we're going to have two little equations, one of them being x, which is what's inside of the absolute value, is going to be equal to the positive version, which is going to be a positive 7. And then the other one is going to be x again, because that's what's inside, is going to be equal to the negative version, which is going to be a negative 7. So there are two answers for this, two possible answers, right? X could either be a positive 7 or x could either be a negative 7. And if you remember from the beginning, that makes sense, right? Because it could be a negative, it'll come out positive, or it could be a positive, it'll come out positive as well. So that's what this is saying here. Okay. Example number 2. Let's try to solve this equation. Try to figure out what is the solution for the absolute value of negative 5x is equal to 25. So again, same question. Do we have the absolute value by itself on one side? And in this case, the answer is yes. So now we're ready to split it. We can split this up into the positive version and split this up into the negative version. The only difference between this example and the last one is that we have to do a little bit of extra work because we're not quite done yet because we haven't solved for x. So for this one, we're going to have whatever's inside, which is negative 5x. And we're going to set that equal to the positive version, which is going to be a positive 25. I'm going to put just a plus just to let you guys know where it came from. And then we're going to have the negative version, which is a separate equation. Whatever was inside, which is negative 5x, is going to be set equal to the negative version, which is going to be negative 25. So once you have the absolute value by itself, you split it up into the positive version and the negative version so to cover your bases for both scenarios. Okay, now we just have to solve this. So we're not done quite yet. So we divide this side by negative 5 on both sides, negative 5, right after you draw the wall. You get x is equal to negative 5. So that's one possible answer. The other one, same idea, divide by negative 5, divide by negative 5. This time we get x is equal to negative and negative cancel, so we get a positive 5. So we get two answers, x is equal to negative 5 or x is equal to positive 5. Okay, eventually they'll start getting a little bit harder. So harder in terms of like there's a few more steps involved. It's not just the absolute value being by itself. So if the absolute value symbol is not by itself on one side, you have to get it by itself on one side yourself. What do I mean by that? So the absolute value symbol here is there, right? So right next to the negative 10. First thing we need to do is get the absolute value by itself on one side so we can split it. So we do the same inverse operations as we would as solving for any other variable. We have to start with the furthest one from the variable, which in this case is not the negative 10, it's actually the 8. That's the furthest one away. That one's a positive 8, so we do the negative 8 on both sides. So minus 8, that way it can go away. This cancels out with that, and we drop down the negative 10. Absolute value of x is equal to 28 minus 8, which is 20. So now that we have this, can we split it yet? Well, if you look, we don't have the absolute value by itself on one side yet, so we can't, right? We have to get rid of that negative 10. So we're going to be dividing, not adding, right? Dividing, because this is multiplied by the absolute value, by negative 10 on both sides. And take the absolute value of x, and then that's going to be equal now to a negative 2. So now we can split it. We can actually have two different equations, right? The positive and the negative, and we can solve for x. One little problem with this example, though, is if you stop and think about it, this problem doesn't make sense, meaning that it doesn't have a solution. So as I said in the beginning, when you take the absolute value of something, you're always going to get a positive number, but here we get a negative 2. How are you going to take the absolute value of something, right, which makes everything positive, and then get a negative? So this is actually an impossible situation, which means that there is no solution. So this is a special case. So in case you ever get the absolute value of something equal to a negative number, well, that's not possible. You can just say it's no solution and move on to the next problem. Okay. Last one. This one actually will have a solution, and this one you'll actually for sure have to get the absolute value by itself on your own. So same idea. We identify where the absolute value symbol is. In this case, it'll be right there next to the 4. Do not distribute. This is not a parenthesis, so you would not use the distributive property. You have to basically get the absolute value symbol by itself. So don't distribute, because then you would get the wrong answer. Inverse operations. We do plus 12 on both sides, plus 12 plus 12. I'm doing the 12, not the 4, because the 12 is a little further away from the absolute value symbol. So plus 12 plus 12. Since the 4 is right next to it, we drop it down. So 4 absolute value of x plus 3 is equal to whatever that is, which happens to be 20. 8 plus 12. So now we have this. 4 multiplied by x plus 3, absolute value is equal to 20. Let's get the absolute value by itself. So we got to divide by 4 on both sides. This side divided by 4, this side divided by 4. And we get the absolute value of x plus 3 is equal to that number, which happens to be 5, because 4 times 5 is 20. Do we have the absolute value alone on one side? Yes, we do. So can we solve it? Yeah, we can now. So now we can actually split it. If you notice, this equation actually does make sense, right? Because you get the absolute value of something equals to a positive number, which actually makes sense. There is a solution here. So now we can split it into the positive version and the negative version to account for both situations. On the positive version, we're going to get x plus 3, whatever was inside, set it equal to a positive 5, or just 5. I'm going to write it anyways. On the negative version, we're going to set x plus 3 equal to a negative 5. And then you solve each one of these equations to figure out what the values of x should be for the absolute value symbol. So when you solve this, minus 3 on both sides, minus 3, you get x is equal to 2 as one of your solutions. And then when you solve this one, minus 3 again, you get x is equal to negative 8 as your other solution. So there are two solutions most of the time when you're dealing with absolute value, because you have two scenarios, the positive version and the negative version. All right, see you guys on the next video.